All right, today we are diving into a huge one, Sapiens. This is the book that tries to do the impossible, right? To tell the entire story of the human race in just one volume. It's a wild ride from us being just another ape to, well, rulers of the whole planet.
And the author Yuval Noah Harari basically boils our entire history down to that one single question. I mean, for millions of years, we were nobody special, just hanging out in the middle of the food chain. So what on earth happened? What changed? You know exactly the image I'm talking about, right? You've seen it a million times. It's that classic drawing of a hunched-over ape that slowly stands up straighter and straighter, marching in this perfect, neat line until it becomes us. It makes our existence feel so inevitable. Well, Harari comes along and says, nope, that's not just wrong, it's a total myth. It's a story we tell ourselves that completely misses the real, much messier picture of our past.
The reality wasn't a nice, clean line at all. It was more like a big, chaotic family bush. And get this, for most of our history, we shared the planet with other human species. We weren't alone. There were Neanderthals, Homo erectus, all living at the same time. We were cousins, not ancestors.
So that brings us to the central mystery of the book. If we weren't the strongest, and we weren't even the biggest brained, fun fact, Neanderthals actually had bigger brains than us, then what was our secret weapon? How did we end up being the last humans standing?
And the answer, according to Sapiens, is all about a massive software update for our brains that happened around 70,000 years ago. Harari calls it the cognitive revolution.
Now, this is absolutely crucial. This wasn't just about learning to say, hey, watch out, there's a lion. Lots of animals can do that. Our big trick was that we developed language to talk about things that aren't even real, things that exist only in our collective imagination. Just think about it for a second. What is a country? It's a story we all agree on. What's money? It's just pieces of paper or numbers on a screen that we all agree have value. None of these things physically exist in nature, but they have immense power because we all believe in them.
And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? This is what makes us different. This bizarre, unique ability to get millions of strangers to work together by telling them a compelling story, a common myth, is what let Sapiens cooperate on a scale that had never been seen before.
So what do you do with this new superpower of cooperation? Well, you don't just survive. You start to completely reshape the world. And that happened through a series of massive revolutions.
Harari breaks down our path to domination into these 3 huge turning points. Each one built on the last and totally changed the game for how humans lived on this planet.
You can really see how it all connects, right? The cognitive revolution was like the new operating system for cooperation. Then, the agricultural revolution created the hardware, cities, kingdoms, empires. And finally, the scientific revolution gave us the power to basically hack the planet itself.
But, of course, a story this big and this bold is going to have its critics. This big history approach, while it's super fascinating, also raises some really important and tough questions.
So here's one of the main criticisms. If you zoom out so far that you're looking at all of human history as just a blip in cosmic time, do you risk making recent painful events like colonialism or slavery seem insignificant? Yeah, and that's the danger, right? Critics worry that this super broad perspective, even though it's meant to be unifying, could accidentally gloss over the real painful power struggles and injustices that define so much of our world today. Does it make the current status quo feel like it was just meant to be?
And here's another thing people push back on. Because the book focuses so much on these huge forces, like biology and geography, it can sometimes feel like our individual choices don't really matter all that much in the grand scheme of things, like we're all just along for the ride.
And finally, there's the argument that the story Sapiens tells, the one where Europe rises to dominate the world through science and capitalism, might be a very Western way of looking at things. Some argue it puts one version of history on a pedestal, ignoring other important narratives from around the globe. But in the end, Sapiens leaves you with this incredible, kind of mind-bending thought. All the things that structure our world, our laws, our nations, our economies, they're all just shared stories. They're powerful, for sure, but they aren't permanent laws of nature. They can be changed. And that leaves us with the biggest question of all. What new stories are we going to tell? And what kind of future will those stories create?
Have you ever just stopped and wondered, how did we do it? How did we go from being just another ape, minding our own business on the savannah, to, well, running the entire planet? Today, we're diving into the Sapiens paradox.
I mean, this is the central mystery that Yuval Noah Harari kicks off Sapiens with, and it's a real head-scratcher. We're not the fastest animal, not the strongest, we don't have claws or fangs, so how on earth did we end up in charge of everything?
To get our heads around this, we have to rewind the clock, way back, to a time when humans really weren't special at all. For most of our history, Homo sapiens were pretty unremarkable creatures, stuck right in the middle of the food chain. We were honestly more worried about being someone's lunch than finding our own.
And this timeline, wow, it really puts it into perspective. Humans have been around for millions of years. Our own species, Homo sapiens, for 300,000 of them. And for almost all of that time, we were just minor animals. There was absolutely nothing to suggest we were destined for greatness. Then, about 70,000 years ago, something happened. A spark was lit, and our story changed forever.
So what was this incredible game changer? Was it sharper tools? Stronger muscles? No, the revolution happened up here, inside our minds. Harari calls it the cognitive revolution.
Our language suddenly became incredibly flexible. One sapiens could tell another, hey, be careful. There's a lion down by the river, right next to that big, twisted tree. That kind of specific info was a massive survival advantage. But here's where it gets really wild. This new language didn't just let us talk about what was there, it let us talk about what wasn't.
Think about it. It allowed us to speak about things that don't physically exist. You can't point to a nation on a map, not really. You can't reach out and touch a corporation or money. These are just ideas, concepts, stories that exist only in our shared imagination. And this right here is our species' unique superpower, creating and believing in shared stories. Harari calls them collective fictions. These are stories that millions, sometimes billions of complete strangers all agree to believe in. And that belief unlocks a level of cooperation that's never, ever been seen before in the natural world.
Harari has this perfect way of putting it. You just can't persuade other animals with these kinds of abstract promises. But us, humans, we build entire civilizations, we fight wars, we dedicate our lives to ideas like gods, human rights, and justice. And all of these things exist only because we've all agreed to imagine them together.
So, why is this so critical? Well, it turns out there's a natural limit to how many people you can have in a group that's held together just by personal relationships and gossip. That magic number is about 150. If you want to get 1,000 people or 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000 people to all pull in the same direction, you need something way more powerful.
And that's where our stories come in. A shared belief in a tribal ancestor, or a nation, or even just the value of a little piece of paper we call money. These stories absolutely shattered that 150-person limit. They allowed millions of strangers to trust each other and work towards a common goal. This, right here, is how we conquered the world.
Okay, so with this incredible superpower of cooperation, humanity's next big jump, the agricultural revolution, that must have been a fantastic leap forward for everyone's quality of life, right? A story of pure, unadulterated progress?
Well, maybe not so fast. That's the story we usually tell ourselves. But Harari's take is, well, it's pretty much the exact opposite. In fact, he calls it history's biggest fraud. When you actually look at the archaeological evidence, it's kind of startling. The average hunter-gatherer, they probably had a much more varied and nutritious diet, worked fewer hours, and had more downtime. Compare that to the average farmer who was stuck eating the same grains day in and day out, doing back-breaking labor, and living with the constant worry of drought, pests, and raids.
So the big takeaway here is that for the average individual person, life actually got worse. In this crazy historical irony, we went looking for an easier life and ended up with a much harder one. We thought we were taming plants like wheat, but as Harari says, in reality, they domesticated us. We became their servants, trapped in one spot, tending to their every need.
And this new, settled lifestyle wasn't just a tough bargain for us. For the animals we brought along for the ride, the consequences were, frankly, even more brutal.
Now, from a purely evolutionary numbers game, you could call animals like chickens and cows a massive success story. Their populations exploded. But if you look at it from the point of view of an individual animal, their lives became a nightmare of immense suffering with their natural lifespans and instincts completely sacrificed for human efficiency.
Okay, so what does all this ancient history, these shared stories and agricultural trade-offs have to do with you and me right now? Well, pretty much everything. It's the very foundation of the world we live in. Just look around you. Our modern world is built on fictions. The money in your bank account, the laws that govern your country, the corporations people work for, the idea of a nation itself, even the concept of human rights. These are all the direct descendants of those first stories we started telling 70,000 years ago.
A dollar bill is really just a piece of printed paper, but it has immense value because billions of us believe it does. A company is just a legal idea, a story that we all treat as a real thing. These systems feel so solid, so permanent, but their power comes entirely from our shared belief. They are the invisible architecture of our lives.
And that brings us to a final, really provocative thought. If our entire global civilization, our economies, our legal systems, our national identities, is all constructed from this giant web of shared stories, just how stable is it? And what happens when we stop believing? Or maybe, what happens when we decide to start telling a different story?